Three that were aboard the Stena Immaculate. In the wake of the disaster, British police arrested the Ceylon's 59-year-old captain on suspicion of gross negligence manslaughter. Yeah, gross negligence would seem to fit, though formal charges have yet to be filed. Ernest Russ, the German company that owns the vessel, confirmed that the captain is a Russian national, while the ship's 14-person crew was composed of Russian and Filipino nationals. While British authorities have stated there's no immediate evidence of foul play, the incident is under heightened scrutiny due to the Stena Immaculate's role in U.S. military logistics. Managed by U.S. firm Crowley, the vessel is part of the Pentagon's tanker security program. It's a fleet of commercial ships contracted to supply fuel for the military during times of need. And here's where it gets even more troubling. Port inspection records show that the Ceylon was a ticking time bomb. A July inspection in Dublin flagged multiple steering-related deficiencies, including unreadable emergency steering position communications and faulty compass readings. Again, not a ship captain, but you would think that steering and navigational tools would seem to be important. 10 deficiencies were cited, ranging from defective fire doors to malfunctioning alarms. A follow-up inspection in Scotland in October uncovered additional issues, yet the ship was still allowed to operate. That history is now central to the investigation. Experts are questioning how, in an era of advanced navigation technology, such a catastrophic collision could even occur. Martin Boyers, chief executive of a neighboring port, called the crash inexplicable, telling CNN, quote, "It seems a mystery. All the vessels now have very highly sophisticated technical equipment to plot courses and to look at any obstacles or anything they've got to avoid," end quote. The UK's Marine Accident Investigation Branch is leading the probe, working alongside American and Portuguese authorities. Alright, coming up in the back of the brief, hundreds of hostages have been freed by Pakistani security forces after separatist militants were
turn left onto Railroad past Casino Road
in an attack that left dozens of people dead. Those details next.
Save on Cox Internet when you add Cox Mobile and get fiber-powered internet at home and unbeatable 5G reliability on the go. And nothing is ever.
Previous day by separatist militants, killing all 33 attackers and ending a deadly two-day hostage standoff. The train came under siege on Tuesday in the isolated regions of the country's Baluchistan
Speed limit
province
reduced
by
ahead.
dozens of members of the Baluch Liberation Army, BLA. Officials described it as one of the deadliest weapons assaults Pakistan has seen in years, claiming the lives of at least 20 hostages and 4 security soldiers, though we should stress that due to the remote location, casualty reports currently vary widely. According to a report from Reuters, on Tuesday, the BLA militants blew up the railway tracks with rockets and began firing on the train, the Jafar Express, which was carrying more than 400 passengers, including at least 150
Turn at
members
the
of
first left
Pakistan's
onto
security
US
forces.
93 Business
After forcing
Loop.
the train to a stop, dozens of militants wearing suicide vests stormed the train. While some passengers managed to flee during the chaos, the BLA took hundreds hostage, reportedly threatening to blow up the train with a rocket launcher if the hostages did not comply. From there, the details of the standoff become bloody. Reporters said this is partly due to the poor cell phone service in the remote area where the attack occurred. Some reporters said the Pakistani army
In
managed to
half a
rescue
mile,
one of
keep
the
right onto Nevada 173 towards Searchlight.
recovery remained unclear. Another 170 hostages were on Wednesday, though these numbers also vary depending on the report. The BLA had threatened to start executing the remaining hostages within 48 hours unless authorities met their demands for the release of Baluch political prisoners and activists. The military responded by mobilizing hundreds of troops, including members of their special forces, and deploying their air force to provide reconnaissance.
Speed
During
limit
their
reduced
final
ahead.
rescue operation, Pakistani special forces reportedly stormed the train, first taking out the suicide bombers, before moving from carriage to carriage, killing all the remaining militants.
Speed limit reduced
Prior to
ahead.
the announcement of the final rescue operation, the BLA claimed Wednesday to have executed as many as 50 hostages and killed 50 others, including Pakistani soldiers, while engaging in firefights
Keep
over the
right
course of
onto
the two-day
Nevada
standoff.
173
But
towards
the Pakistani
Searchlight.
army put the death toll much lower, saying 21 hostages and 4 security security troops were killed as a result of the hijacking. Neither account could be independently confirmed by the Washington Post or the New York Times. For some context, militant attacks in the Balochistan province, which borders Afghanistan and Iran, have surged by more than 80% over the past year. The BLA is the largest of several ethnic armed groups currently fighting the government. Their grievances include rampant poverty and neglect by the government, and they've been demanding a larger share of the wealth produced by regional mines and mineral deposits. Pakistani officials say the train attack was orchestrated by terror leaders operating out of Afghanistan and urged the Taliban to crack down on their operations. So far, the Taliban-led government in Kabul has not commented on the incident. And that, my friends, is the President's Daily Brief for Thursday, the 13th of March. If you have any questions or comments, please reach out to me at pbb@thefirsttv.com. Now, if you love the PBB, but you always wondered what it would be like to have it without ads, well, you can make that bucket list item happen simply by becoming a premium member of the President's Daily Brief by visiting pdbpremium.com. I'm Mike Baker. I'll be back later today with the PDB Afternoon Bulletin. Until then, stay informed, stay safe, stay cool.
That feeling of owning your first Mercedes-Benz? Real. From the leather stitching to the iconic design, every element of a Mercedes lives up to its reputation. See for yourself at your local dealer. Offers are waiting.
Becoming a medical assistant opens so many doors to healthcare careers, and in 9 months, this could be you. Get hands-on training in real-world labs, clinical externships, and the support of fellow students and teachers at Pima Medical Institute. Visit pmi.edu for details.
It's March 13th. I'm Brian D. Wright, former CIA operations officer, and this is The Wright Report. A good day to you, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to The Wright Report, your daily news broadcast. I've got 4 briefs for you this morning that are shaping America and the world. First up, Democrats are shutting down the U.S. government, or at least that isn't the plan as of this morning, forced on Senate Democrats really by a party base that is just wanting to resist President Trump at all costs. We'll explain that drama out of D.C. coming up. Second, ICE is reporting that 32,000 illegal aliens have been deported so far under President Trump, and that is infuriating to both Democrats and pregnant Chinese women. We'll talk about that connection coming up. Third, the world is reacting to the Trump tariffs, but with 2 very, very different approaches. We will compare how Latin America is responding versus Europe and Canada, with someone in that mix saying that Trump has an ugly face. Oh. Fourth, we've got some global updates to cover from the UK, Greenland, Taiwan, Germany, and a head-scratcher this morning from Brazil, where climate activists are cutting down the rainforest to save the rainforest. I'm confused about that, and you should be too, so we'll be confused together coming up. But first, let's get to our top story of the morning. The U.S. government is shutting down. That is back on. NBC News report that Senator Chuck Schumer and other Senate Democrats have decided to reject that bipartisan funding bill that swept through the House earlier this week. Instead, they're demanding a new bill, one that will fund the U.S. government for the next 30 days. That would give Democrats time to get a better deal that reflects their priorities, not the Republicans who, well, they control the Senate, the House, and the Oval Office, but put that aside. If the Democrats do not get their new bill, it is a government shutdown starting Friday at midnight, throwing a wrench into not only U.S. government operations, but probably the U.S. economy, at least part. So that's the bad news. Here's some of the good news. The U.S. economy is in a little bit better shape than we imagined. The Wall Street Journal and Reuters report that inflation cooled a little bit more than expected last month, up by just a modest 0.2%. That means that year-on-year core inflation now sits at 3.1%. Looking under the hood, there's one special bright spot for us this morning: food prices. Inflation on your grocery bill continues to be tamed let's say, except for egg prices. But good news on that as well. Brazil is ramping up their exports of eggs. The country of Turkey is as well. Combine that with the fact that America's got some new egg layers being raised. Once we get all of those things firing on all cylinders, we should be back to normal by later this spring. Bird flu, of course, depending. Still, the storm clouds are growing. Housing costs remain stubbornly high. Also, consumer spending continues to slip. We saw the data yesterday regarding airline tickets. And that echoes my previous reporting over the past couple of months that the working and middle class are really struggling. Now, the big question, of course, is how the tariffs will play into all of that. A lot of speculation on it. But bottom line, we got a dash of good economic news yesterday that should put us in a pretty good overall mood, I think. And, you know, we'll take it. Not in a good mood, however, are the Democrats this morning, quote, everyone is mad at everyone else, end quote. That is the state of Democrats this morning, at least according to Axios News. They report the Democrats are confused and punching at each other this morning over how to fight President Trump. That anger spiked last week during the president's State of the Union address when, we may recall, Representative Al Green of Texas swung his cane in the air and shouted some gibberish. Meanwhile, we also might recall that other members sat and glared as President Trump gave a child, a poor kid with brain cancer recovering from it, gave him a special badge to be a new Secret Service agent. It was just for fun, but it was a sweet gesture that made the boy and his father quite proud. Democrats, though, as we watched the video, they were furious at that child and his dad and President Trump. Black activists actually called the boy and the father, Uncle Toms. Well, over the past week, it has gotten only worse for the Democrat Party. The Hill is reporting that the Democrat Senator, Miss Lisa Slotkin of Michigan, she insulted voters on Tuesday by referring to Americans as teenagers with emotional outbursts and anger problems. And then she said this, quote, what do you do when you have a teenager who is threatening themselves and others? You just try to get them through this period alive so that their brain can fully form, end quote. Oh, that's nice. That obviously did not go over very well, but Ms. Slotkin, as of this morning, refuses to apologize. Meanwhile, Politico magazine is reporting that the pro-Palestinian wing of the party, they are pushing Democrats this morning to go even further to the left on a lot of issues, but especially the defense of Gaza. And as some Democrats refuse to do that, the activists are inundating those officers over the offices with various phone calls and emails. Party leaders are furious about that, saying that the strategy of pressuring fellow Democrats is not going to work and they're not going to respond to being pushed. To which activists are saying this morning, fine, we will take matters into our own hands. And they are. ABC News reports that activists are vandalizing and setting afire Tesla vehicles and their charging stations throughout the country. Those are acts of violence. In fact, they are being directed clearly at President Trump's chief ally and owner of Tesla, Mr. Elon Musk. CNN is reporting that activists are even opening fire on Tesla dealerships, and thank God nobody has been hurt so far, no deaths to report. Other activists are using Molotov cocktails and setting afire various Tesla targets, including out in Oregon. That is where a trans radical did his firing work. He goes by the name of Lucy Nelson. His real name is Justin Nelson. He is part of the Antifa movement. It's actually a subset of transgender people. They call themselves Trantifa. By the way, President Trump says that the acts by Mr. Nelson and others like him will be regarded as domestic terrorism by the FBI and the Department of Justice. Trump offered some salty words about these folks earlier this week, and I will give them to you, but little ears warning, salty stuff. Quote, we are going to catch you, and you are going to go through hell when we do, end quote. But in the meantime, America has got these Democrat activists at work this morning, from being pro-Palestine to the pro-Antifa people, waving canes, insulting voters, and throwing firebombs. To which Democrat pollsters this morning are saying that the party has created, quote, a massive branding problem. On Tuesday, Politico reported on an internal party poll showing that a majority of Americans think the Democrats are focused on helping people other than them. Also, this internal Democrat poll shows that most Americans do not believe the Democrats honor work or value work. Third, the poll shows that Democrats don't share American values. And finally, a majority of us said the Democrats don't look out for working class people. That internal poll, by the way, comes after a separate internal poll from last week showing exactly the same. One final thing to tell you about this morning, there are some Democrats who are trying to fight back against these more radical elements of their party. former Democrat Senator John Tester of Montana. He lost his election back in November. He said recently that the party has gone absolutely bonkers on the transgender issue, especially, quote, men shouldn't be playing in women's sports. It's a bunch of crap, unquote. Meanwhile, Governor Gavin Newsom of California has echoed that same kind of approach or language, criticizing trans people, especially the so-called trans men in sports. And now that said, we should approach Mr. Newsom with some skepticism on this. Politico magazine is noting that his trans pivot, as it were, was probably an angry reaction to some trans activists in his states. He told them a couple of weeks ago to not introduce some trans legislation that they wanted, but they did it anyway, and then it was at that point that he came out swinging against the trans vote. The LA Times is reporting that California's queer activists are now sickened and disgusted with him. For instance, we've got a state senator, Mr. Scott Wiener. He said that he is being no different than what Trump would do. He then added this, quote, the Republican strategy to eliminate trans people is to create fake moral panics to falsely paint trans people as being threats, end quote. So, speaking of threats, I have reached out to Mr. Wiener about this issue of threats, but he has not responded. I specifically asked about the issue of Trampipa setting a fire and blowing up Tesla facilities and the vehicles in this country. So, we'll see what he says about that. I'll keep you posted if he responds. Bottom line, ladies and gentlemen, pivoting to some analysis and opinion. Democrats are in a pickle, but it is of their own making. We see it in their government shutdown strategy. Those senators are doing that this morning and throughout this week, all because their base is really angry, they're very dispirited, and they are demanding that their party leaders go even further to the left, even if that harms the economy. Or if I could put that a little bit differently, they want the Senate to recess President Trump and Elon Musk and whomever, no matter the cost, up to and including Molotov cocktails and protecting the pro-Hamas terror elements of the party, as they are this morning in New York City. And I'll tell you, watching this, as a former Democrat of 20 years, this, to me, is just incredible to watch my former friends turn that party into what is becoming, if not already, a death cult. And it's why it is worth my repeating this morning that my former party, they do not have a branding problem. They don't need better TikTok videos. And they don't have a candidate problem either. They don't need more handsome or pretty faces to show America. Their problem is their ideology. Over the past 15 years or so, they have become absolutely unrecognizable. They are embracing policies that are just demonstrably grotesque and violent and un-American. And I would argue, frankly, demonic. So that's my view this morning, but I'll tell you, based on polling from inside of the Democrat Party itself, my view is the view of most Americans as well. So, with that, let's take our first break of the morning, shall we? We'll be right back. Are you still putting off saving and investing because, you'll get to it someday? Stash turns someday into today. Stash isn't just an investing app. It is a registered investment advisor who combines automated investing with dependable financial strategies to help you reach your goals faster. They'll provide you with personalized advice on what to invest in based on formal goals, or if you want to just sit back and watch your money go to work, you can opt into their award-winning expert management advisory service. Criminals, 10,000 with some pending criminal to go. Who are 14,000 convicted criminals, 10,000 with more domestic developments. ABC. Welcome back to the Right Report. Let's continue with our briefs this morning with more domestic developments. ABC News reports that ICE officials and their local law enforcement partners have arrested over 32,000 illegal aliens since President Trump took office. That includes 14,000 convicted criminals, 10,000 with some pending criminal charges, another 1,000 suspected gang members, and 44 fugitives that are and were wanted in their home countries. So that then leaves about 9,000 or so who are what are called incidental arrests. These are illegal aliens who were around or near release them as appropriate. Now that is different from most ICE officers who tend to focus on investigating and arresting and deporting people who have already been arrested or booked in some local jails. Now, to be clear, sanctuary cities and states do not have to cooperate with this 287G program, although a few sheriffs are doing it anyway. NBC and News Nation reports on one of the guys, a sheriff named Dale Wagner of Adams County, Washington. He said that it is his duty to work with the federal government to get criminals off the street. But Washington's Democrat Attorney General disagrees. The man filed a lawsuit yesterday to stop this sheriff, Mr. Wagner, from assisting the feds, saying that the sheriff is following in the footsteps of white supremacists and Trump Nazis. To which the sheriff Wagner is saying this, quote, "Public safety should never be a political issue, yet this lawsuit prioritizes ideology over the safety of our communities," end quote. So I'll keep you posted on that and that lawsuit. And meanwhile, ABC News is also reporting something else quite remarkable. ICE detention facilities, they are chock-a-block full. The arrests are just too many. 47,000 beds are already taken this morning with no more available. The Trump White House has a few ideas on how to fix that problem in the short term. So, for example, they are planning to send any future male illegals or arrestees to federal prisons, which do have some space. Meanwhile, Mr. Trump's team is reopening a facility in Texas that can handle the families, keeping them together as they are deported together. And all of that then is making some Chinese women very nervous this morning, as the South China Morning Post is reporting. Pregnant Chinese women and their husbands in Beijing were hoping to travel to the U.S. to have their babies here. They want the child to get U.S. citizenship, of course, upon birth, and then immediately leave the hospital to go back to China. But with President Trump issuing his decree that, of course, eliminates birthright citizenship, they are nervous for their future babies, their anchor babies, as they are sometimes called. They might not get U.S. citizenship after all. Now, as I have reported, a lot of judges have already blocked this Trump executive order on the issue. It's going to end up at the Supreme Court later this year, or at least more than likely. But until then, these Chinese women are really nervous that birth tourism is going to end up with a lot of expenses, but no U.S. citizenship for their babies. Which takes us to one other piece of news that frankly is perhaps the most shocking of the morning. In the first time since the year 1850, driven exclusively and only by foreigners, both legal and illegal, Newsweek magazine is reporting that the number of foreign-born in this country grew by 1.6 million between the year 2022 and 2023. Most all of them were Biden asylum seekers. Those foreigners all in make up nearly 50 million residents of this country, or 14% of the overall population. That is a record. Of the 50 million people, by the way, the number of illegals of that 50 million, that is very much debated, but estimates range between 12 million to at least 20 million. Pivoting now to analysis and opinion. Folks, before the break, I said that Democrats don't have a branding problem or a candidate problem, rather an ideology problem. And I think that this is a perfect example. They opened the borders for the past 4 years, letting in more foreigners than we have had since at least the year 1850, if not all the way back to the founding of the country. And the ideology behind that policy choice was very, very simple. Replace the native-born Americans with foreign people who will then forever be grateful and reliant on the Democrat Party. And if anybody says, well, it's a conspiracy theory, well, we actually have proof. Recall that last summer, former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said that she would like to make all of America's illegals, or undocumented as she called them, she wanted to make all of them into U.S. citizens, all of them. She wants 12 to 20 million illegals made U.S. citizens immediately. So there you go. That's the political goal, and that is the overall ideology, which, by the way, helps to explain why her colleague in Washington State this morning, the Attorney General, is now suing a sheriff in Adams County who has the audacity of getting in the way of that plan. He is upholding the U.S. law in this country, but that then destroys the leftist plan for total power. And that is just awful, and that is just so clearly treasonous. But here's the good news. Word is getting out about this un-American plan. As I shared before the break, Democrats' own internal polling show a collapse in support by actual Americans this morning for the party. And as I've been sharing over the past couple of weeks, migrants from around the world, they are staying home or going babies in Beijing. And by the way, with luck, we are going to get that issue of birthright citizenship straightened out very soon. Let's hope by the end of the year, more to come on that. Speaking of China, let's talk about those turkeys with some global tariff updates. The outlet Morningstar is reporting that Communist Party officials have summoned executives from Walmart to Beijing, demanding answers and offering warnings to the company. Here's why. Now, on Monday, I shared with you how the company was trying to squeeze their Chinese suppliers, trying to get
2
some
miles,
10%
keep
give or take
left
cuts
onto
on pricing to make up for the Trump tariffs. Well, apparently the Chinese factory owners were very upset about that, and they complained to President Xi and the Communist Party. To which Beijing is now saying to Walmart, quote, if Walmart insists on forcing the price cuts, then what awaits Walmart is not just talk, end quote. Clearly threatening there the Arkansas retailer with some unspecific reprisals. China is also striking back this morning on the fentanyl front. Reuters News is reporting that Beijing is calling Trump's tariffs on China, quote, threatening, and that, quote, it will seriously undermine dialogue and cooperation between the two countries on drug control, end quote. Now that is quite something. Pivoting now to analysis and opinion. Folks, Beijing has long said that they have absolutely zero control over the flow of fentanyl abroad. They have long said that it is absolutely impossible for the Communist Party, for Beijing, to stop that. But with this quote, they just admitted that actually they can turn the spigot of drugs off and on a bit, because of course they can. They have a mass surveillance state and a central economy. The drug factories, as we've talked about before, and their owners, they give kickbacks to the party. So, of course they have some control. Which means, ladies and gentlemen, the fentanyl war, it was always intentional. It was a way to rot America from the inside out, slaughtering 100,000 or so of us each and every year without firing a shot. And that is because the Communist Party is evil, and they will do whatever it takes to destroy us. It is really that simple, truly. And that is bottom line. Next, China is also trying to destroy little old Canada, or better said, harm them as a warning. Canada's media outlet that is called the CBC, along with Reuters and Newsweek, report that Beijing has announced some major new tariffs on Canadian agricultural products. Those were just announced, but they were in regards to some tariffs that Canada actually placed on Chinese goods back in October. So that's curious. We should ask, what explains the 6-month delay between Canada's tariffs and China's reaction? Well, as the New York Times is reporting, it was a warning to Canada and Mexico. Absolutely do not cooperate with President Trump on what the Treasury Secretary, Mr. Scott Bessent, calls Fortress North America, with massive tariffs on all Chinese goods that would be coming into the U.S., Mexico, and Canada. So, very interesting angle to this tariff wars this morning. More to come on that. I'll keep you posted. Speaking of, we've got some global updates and responses on how to handle President Trump and his tariffs. And these responses, ladies and gentlemen, could not be any different. With Mexico and Brazil in one corner, and Canada and Europe in the other. To quickly refresh our memories on this, Trump slapped 25% tariffs on both aluminum and steel all around the world. Those kicked in yesterday. And as I shared with you, that has deeply impacted Mexico's steel industry especially, but also Brazil. Their steel and aluminum industry are now taking a hit as well. To which officials in Mexico City and the capital of Brasilia are saying to the White House, well, let's not be rash. Let's keep talking. Bloomberg News and Reuters report that presidents from both of those countries certainly are not happy with Trump or his tariffs, but they want to avoid provoking Mr. Trump any further. So rather than escalate and slap on some reciprocal tariffs, they would just prefer to wait and meet with Mr. Trump and his team directly. Now, if that does happen, that would be quite awkward for the Brazilian negotiators. Their president, Mr. Lula, said yesterday that Donald Trump has, quote, an ugly face, end quote. Oh, well, that seems problematic. Even still, the Latin American contingent is taking a cautious and relatively restrained approach with Mr. Trump and his tariffs, at least so far, but that is absolutely not true of Canada and Europe. The BBC, Bloomberg News, and the Washington Post all report that the many nations have slapped back at Mr. Trump, levying billions of dollars in reciprocal tariffs, targeting especially said to Ireland's president, who was at the White House, don't even think about pushing me on this stuff. The two gentlemen sat together at the annual St. Patrick's Day meeting at the White House, which was a little frosty. Mr. Trump gently complained that Ireland had changed their tax code years and years ago to steal American companies,
2 miles,
including
keep
pharmaceutical
right
companies.
onto US
And
95.
while Trump said, you know, look, I don't blame Ireland for doing that. They're clearly ripping us off, and that's got to change. So I guess we offer an extra leaf in the clovers to Ireland this morning. Good luck, folks. Pivoting now to some analysis and opinion. Folks, I got to tell you, as I read this and reflect on this and talk to some of my friends in D.C., this is really a pretty remarkable moment when we look at these two different corners and how they're responding to this country and our president. The leftist leaders of Brazil and Mexico have clearly figured this out. They don't have the cars. They don't have the leverage. And their economies need the United States and our economy. So clearly, obviously, why vote for there? Give the guy a bucket of honey and make it, you know, extra gold. So I think that's a lesson, though, that is lost on Canada and Europe this morning. But I think they are probably going to learn the lesson real soon. You know, just ask, I don't know, President Zelensky, just as one guy. Anyway, more to come on that. Such an incredible moment in the world of history. With that, let's take our second break of the morning. We'll be right back. President Trump continues to ratchet up the tariffs on China. In fact, it's looking like another 10% or so this week. Well, as we covered on the podcast, that's pretty good in lots of ways, but it could squeeze our supply of especially medications. So that is why you need to go to chase.com this very morning. When you do, their doctors are going to help you get an extended supply of your own medications, or they can help you build a go-bag of medications that you can keep either in the house or take with you on the road. And those can range from antibiotics to EpiPens, from diabetes drugs to ivermectin. But whatever option or medication you pick, here is what you've got to do before those supply chains get kinked. Go to JASE.com. You've got to just fill out a simple online form, and in a few days, you will get the medications you need delivered right to your door. Again, that's JASE.com. And by the way, enter promo code RIGHT at checkout. You are going to get a great discount on your order when you do. Again, that's promo code RIGHT at JASE.com. And do this today, folks, because there is no telling what tomorrow might bring.
Marketing isn't hard. But I'll tell you a little secret. It doesn't have to be. Let me point something out. Do with Mom. That's L. I never know what's going to happen.
For the U.S. Navy. Now, some of this news earlier this week, there was a Portuguese-flagged vessel called the So Long that was navigating the waters of the UK's North Sea on Monday. That struck a U.S.-flagged vessel called the Stena Immaculate that was carrying jet fuel for the U.S. Navy. Now, satellite images and tracking devices show that the So Long made an absolutely clear beeline right at the Immaculate, striking her with engines at full throttle. The British government, the BBC, and the French wire service AFP report, in fact, did on Monday that investigations were launched. They are now underway, and we're getting a little bit more intel about that. Let me offer you this next critical nugget of news. The captain of the So Long is Russian. The rest of his crew is mostly Russian as well, and a little bit of Filipino. Maritime experts and government officials across the board say there is absolutely no way that the Russian captain didn't have oodles of warnings at dozens and dozens of miles before he struck the Immaculate. It is inconceivable that this Russian captain didn't know what was going to happen. So that is what we know as of this moment. But even still, as minimal as it is, it's very interesting, considering that the Russian President Vladimir Putin is now reviewing President Trump's peace deal with Ukraine, by way of some very humorous speculation this morning. So here's what I think is going on. We've either got a case of a captain who was just drunk off his gourd and not paying attention, or possibly he was motivated and or paid in cash to crash into the Immaculate, knowing exactly what was on board and that it was for the U.S. Navy. If that's the scenario, I suspect that somebody did that in order to complicate the peace deal with Ukraine. Now, let's see if that low-confidence speculation pans out, but I think that this is very much worth our attention to watch, with more to come. Next, we go north of this incident in the UK to the island of Greenland this morning for some fresh election results. The pro-business and independence parties of Greenland beat out the socialists. NPR and others call this a surprise vote, given the fact that the winners want a close relationship with the United States, even after President Trump made those various demands or requests that Greenland become part of the U.S. Reaction in Denmark this morning is utter disappointment. We'll recall that that country is the owner, I guess, quasi-colonial power of Greenland. Reuters News is reporting that Danish officials are absolutely despondent. They say that this is probably the best electoral result that the White House could have possibly imagined or hoped for, but the worst for Denmark. Even still, the real negotiations with Greenland now begin. More to come on that as this new government gets assembled. The White House starts to make their moves. Next, we move on to another important island, that is Taiwan. Bloomberg News is reporting that the U.S. is expediting the delivery of some weapons to Taipei this morning. Officials in Taiwan say that this equipment is, quote, related to asymmetric warfare, end quote. In other words, folks, we are talking about drones. And to that end, the Asia Times is reporting that the Pentagon's elusive DARPA unit, they are dispatching a special drone ship called the USX-1 Defiant that is heading to Taiwan, if not directly to the Taiwanese government, then certainly to that theater. It's going to be delivered probably in the next number of weeks to months. I would encourage you folks, if you want to do a little internet searching on this USX-1 or look at the transcript links, just a super cool ship. This sucker is huge, but it has stealth technologies, no crew, and it can autonomously refuel. Critically, it can also operate as part of a swarm as boat house starts to make their moves. Next, we move on to another important island, that is Taiwan. Bloomberg News is reporting that the U.S. is expediting the delivery of some weapons to Taipei this morning. Officials in Taiwan say that this equipment is, quote, related to asymmetric warfare, end quote. In other words, folks, we are talking about drones. And to that end, the Asia Times is reporting that the Pentagon's elusive DARPA unit, they are dispatching a special drone ship called the USX-1 Defiant that is heading to Taiwan, if not directly to the Taiwanese government, and certainly to that theater. It's going to be delivered probably in the next number of weeks to months. I would encourage you folks, if you want to do a little internet searching on this USX-1 or look at the transcript links, just a super cool ship. This sucker is huge, but it has stealth technologies, no crew, and it can autonomously refuel. Critically, it can also operate as part of a swarm, which would then put at risk any Chinese naval attack or blockade on Taiwan. Now, as folks probably recall, this is all part of the Pentagon's program called Replicator, hoping to turn Taiwan into a porcupine of sorts before next August. And that's the goal, anyway, preventing or discouraging a Chinese invasion or blockade. And of course, as we have covered, China knows that. And perhaps that is why, for the past several weeks, they've started to tweak their language about Taiwan, saying that reunification will happen, and, interestingly, with the help of some Chinese on island. They also dropped the word peaceful from some of their statements about reunification. Bottom line, folks, and pivoting now to my analysis and opinion, China is certainly aware of our August replicator deadline, and they are developing plans and technology to deal with it, either to outpace us and or to outperform us. So that is why I continue to pay attention to that August deadline, because I imagine that Beijing does as well. Next up, and speaking of the Chinese, I've got a doozy of a report from Germany, and this is a big deal, ladies and gentlemen. For years, intelligence officials in Berlin have assessed with high confidence that the COVID-19 virus escaped from that lab in Wuhan. The German outlet DW and the UK's Times of London report that the former Chancellor of Germany, Ms. Angela Merkel, instructed her country's Federal Intelligence Service, or the BND, to figure out the origins of the virus years ago. They did that, they didn't use their own intel sources, and they launched a secret operation codenamed Sorima that showed conclusively that negligence at the Wuhan Institute of Virology led to the escape of the virus and the global pandemic. Now that intel came from inside the institute, and it showed that scientists were engaged in gain-of-function research and clearly not properly controlled. German Chancellor Merkel then buried that report for reasons that aren't clear. Her successor, Mr. Chancellor Scholz, buried the findings as well. Pivoting to some analysis and opinion, let me tell you why that report was buried. Two reasons. First, like much of the world, Germany wants Chinese investment and access to the domestic Chinese market. Releasing that report would have caused both of those options or goals to be firmly and forever foreclosed. Second, I suspect that the Germans discovered that elements from within the United States government were involved in this as well, including and especially in the NIH and others, especially Dr. Tony Fauci. He and his colleagues know exactly what happened at that institute in Wuhan. They participated in some cases, and they then tried to hide the truth. In fact, that is what congressional investigators have largely demonstrated and proven. So let us hope this morning that President Trump and the CIA and the ODNI declassify what really happened and who's culpable. Because in my view, a whole bunch of people should be in prison this morning, a lot of them, and they're not. So more to come on that someday soon, I hope. Finally this morning, we leave behind intrigue and mysteries of the past to a head-scratcher of today, and it is coming to us from Brazil. ABC News is reporting that the Brazilian government is getting ready for a global conference on global warming in the rainforest by cutting down the rainforest. The climate meeting is called COP3, and it is in a city that will be inundated with about 50,000 or so global delegates. Now that is a lot of people and a lot of car traffic. So that is why Brazil's leftist government is cutting down the local rainforest to make a memorial highway. Satellite images show a cut to the rainforest for a road that is wonderfully called Freedom Highway. It has everything. It has solar panels for lighting, cycle lanes for bikes, and of course no trees. And that's a head scratcher. Right, they are trying to save the rainforest by cutting it down. Now that confuses me. And now it confuses you too. So now we can be confused together, leaving us to wonder this morning. And maybe this whole thing is just kind of a scam. Maybe none of this is actually about climate change. Let's go ask Greta Thunberg. Anyway, more to come on that. And with that, let us be sassy and conclude this morning's episode of The Right Report. As always, I will see you tomorrow, God willing. Until then, I leave you with the creed of every good spy, every wise American. They're the words from the Gospel of John, chapter 8, verse 32. And you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Good day.
If you want to feel more connected to human, listen to Beautiful Around Us each week. I take a phone call from one random anonymous human. There's over 400 episodes in my back catalog.
But in any event, 877-381-3811. Okay. Man, there's a lot going on. The Democrats have announced they're going to shut down the government. Fetterman says he will not vote for that. He's going to vote with the Republicans. Now, why? There are 53 Republicans. With Fetterman, that's 54 who will vote to fund the government. And so they need 7 Democrats. Chuck Schumer put out the word that they are not to vote to keep the government open. So they want to close the government in defense of the government. This underscores what I've been telling you for decades. The Democrat Party represents Washington, D.C. It represents the vast bureaucracy. It represents all those buildings, most of which are empty. It represents all that fraud and waste and abuse. It represents those 50 million condos. It represents that and worse. And they will not allow, to the extent they can stop, they will not allow an end to the waste, fraud, and abuse. Report after report, year after year, by the Government Accountability Office, GAO, at $250 billion to $500 billion a year. Think about that. That's your money. It's wasted. They don't know where it went. They don't know where it went. $500 billion every single year. $50 trillion over the course of 10 years. I want you to think about that, America. Not 50 trillion, 5 trillion, excuse me. $5 trillion over the course of 10 years. They don't want to cut anything. They want to add. They want more personnel, more dead weight, more bloat, more grants, more contracts, shoveling more billions out the door to radical left-wing groups with associations with their favorite political hacks.
their favorite law firms, their favorite political causes. It's a big deal. And the Democrat Party has said tonight, we would rather not fund Medicaid. We would rather not fund the children's lunch program. We would rather not fund all these programs that they used to say are necessary. So the Democrats are going to use the filibuster rule to prevent a vote. Just to prevent a vote on the budget that was passed in the House of Representatives. They've taken the position that you will blame the Republicans. They've taken the position that the more pain you're in, the better. That's the position they've taken. So they actually believe that the Republicans want to slash Medicaid when they're blocking the funding of Medicaid. They actually think you're going to believe that the Republicans don't believe that the poor should receive any subsidies when they are going to block the poor from getting subsidies. They're doing this because the radical left within the Democrat Party, the Marxist Islamists, insist on it. And the Democrat Party is basically the party of the bluest parts of New York City, the bluest parts of Washington, D.C., and the bluest parts of Los Angeles and Chicago. That's it. They don't represent anyone else or anything else. Tax cuts for billionaires, they say. I ask you, are you that gullible to fall for that Marxist claptrap? The answer is no. Well, spread the word. It's Trump who wants to cut taxes on tips to eliminate them. It's Trump who wants to eliminate taxes on overtime. It's Trump who wants to eliminate taxes on Social Security payments. It's Trump who wants to provide credits to individuals who have to stay home to take care of family members who are ill. None of those are Democrat proposals. The Democrats say billionaire tax cuts. They talk about Elon Musk, but they never talk about George and Alex Soros. Why is that? Elon Musk creates tens of thousands of jobs. Hardworking blue-collar jobs at Tesla. Hardworking blue-collar jobs at SpaceX. And before that, PayPal. He's literally created things. What has George Soros created? Other than chaos and mayhem. Seriously. What has he created? They don't care about billionaires, ladies and gentlemen. The waste, fraud, and abuse trillions of dollars already. We see the tip of the iceberg that's been uncovered in the course of weeks. That's what they stand for, and nobody should have to pay for that. Hard-working, middle-class, blue-collar workers, white-collar workers, billionaires, or billionaires. Nobody should have to subsidize graft and corruption. Nobody. Billionaires they're concerned about. I'm concerned about the government. If the guy next door to you is a billionaire, why does it matter? Is he taking something from you? No. He or she have done something which attracts all kinds of voluntary money. Nobody's forcing anybody to buy anything except the federal government. You don't pay your federal taxes, they take your home, they take everything, and they throw you in prison. No company can do that. Bernie Sanders sees all this. What's his answer? More Marxism, more centralization of power, more departments and agencies, more bureaucrats, more regulation.